This mimer we're learning now, lArba focuses on what Bedikas Chametz is and what Biur Chametz is. And it's a very important idea. Because normally you think of Bedikas Chametz, searching for Chametz, as searching places. And the Rebbe in his Maimah says that if the only meaning of this Mishnah, it's a Mishnah in Mesechtes Pesachim, lArba Osor Greatness Ohr, the night of the 14th, we search for Chametz to the light of a candle. We use a candle, a light. The Rebbe said if it's only about searching for Chametz, then it's searching for places where there's Chametz, then the Mishnah should have said the night of the 14th, you search places where there's Chametz. Say exactly what you mean. It's like instead of scratching your ear this way, you scratch your ear this way. Isra, are you on a plane? I don't believe it. You're actually flying? You're in the air flying, or how are you able?
Yes, yeah, I don't think you can hear through the headphones.
I can hear you. I can hear you. How are you able
to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so
go ahead.
I got free internet because they gave my kosher meal away to somebody else. So they gave me free internet as a compensation.
You're flying from Eretz Yisrael to America?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's really Mashiach's time. I mean, this is amazing. You know, I remember.
No, I'll tell you. Let me tell you the highlight of the day, Rabbi. The highlight of the day.
Yes.
We had a stop over in Frankfurt Airport. I put on Talis and Tefillin in Frankfurt Airport. That was the highlight of the day.
Baruch Hashem. Transformation. Wow. I remember we had the chaplain from Kuwait. He was in Kuwait or Saudi Arabia. He was on one time. And now we're talking to you mid-air. You're learning mid-air. It's really Mashiach's time. I mean, if Mashiach's not coming, if Mashiach doesn't come because of this, I don't know what's going to take him to come. It's unbelievable. Anyway, good to see you. So let's learn a little Chassidus. So what I'm saying, what were you saying? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
No, I didn't say anything. I put my background in as matzah baking since we're on Pesach. So.
Okay, that's cute. So let's go back. So the Rebbe says the implication of the Mishnah of lArba Osor Greatness Ohr implies you have to search the Chametz, not search for the Chametz. You have to search the Chametz. Why should you search the Chametz? Because the Chametz represents haughtiness, ego, gaiva, negativity. The question is, what form do we each have? And we have to search that. And that's the beginning stages of leaving Mitzrayim. Because remember, when are we searching for Chametz? The night before Pesach. So Yetzias Mitzrayim, the actual Exodus, only begins the night after. So we have a 24-hour period of finding out what's our type of Chametz. Once you find out what type of Chametz is, comes the next morning, and you have to do Biur Chametz. You have to get rid of the Chametz. And this is a very important lesson in character refinement and in many other things. Before you can succeed in getting rid of a problem, you have to know very well what the problem is. Before you can defeat an enemy, you have to know who your enemy is. Okay? A basic rule that I was taught when I was, actively doing, solicitation for shlichus, for Chabad House and all that was, you have to know your donor. If you solicit them with too little or too much, both are a waste of time and not going to lead to success. You have to know what that person is worth or what they like giving to, things like that. Then you'll customize your solicitation. So in every aspect of life, knowing the chametz, knowing the issue, is very important. So that's number one. That's at night. Then comes the morning. And the morning is you have to get rid of it. If it's something negative, you don't want it. Because you don't want to go into Pesach with this negativity. Because boy, is that going to feel uncomfortable sitting at the Seder. We're celebrating the Exodus. We're celebrating liberation and freedom. And yet, we have a full plate. And this is also very important. It's important to, and I would think, Erev Pesach, on one hand, it's a hectic day. On the other hand, there's time to breathe a little bit and just think and prepare. So it's a good time to incorporate that getting rid of the chametz in the morning hours of total elimination. And the Rebbe says this is the elimination that's analogous to a wealthy person versus a poor person. Because the night of Pesach, the Mishnah says, Ohr la'arba osir, Ohr la'yudalid. Yudalid is associated with the Hebrew word dai, dalid yud. You reverse yud dalid, you get dai. And the Gemara says, dai machseir asher yechsar loi, that you have to fill the poor person with their needs as much as they need, but not more. You're not obligated to give them more. So why is that? Because the poor person is coming with a limited request. I don't have this amount of food or clothing, please fill me up. Okay? But the attitude of an expansion that goes beyond what the needs are, that's not included. So that's why the Rebbe says the night of the 14th, the avodah, the activity is just filling up a need. Whereas the morning already brings the Gemara, the morning is called the Rishon, although the 15th is the first, but the Gemara equates the day of the 14th to the 15th night to be Rishon. Rishon implies we say in Hebrew, Yiddish, the gevirish attitude, the wealthy attitude. What's the wealthy attitude? There's the negative wealthy attitude that I own the world and I'm the boss and you're not going to tell me because I'm a bitch and I have a lot of money. But on a spiritual level, on a holy level, the attitude is complete wholesomeness that doesn't come. It's not generated because of a problem, but because in and of itself, it's wealthy, it's rich. There are people who are aristocratic. Aristocracy, that is not because, I have to act a certain way. No, this is your DNA. If you come from that type of family, you eat, in the dining room. You don't eat in the kitchen every night. The Rebbe's brother-in-law will tell you a secret. Rashag, I was told from people who were in the house, every evening he had supper in his dining room, not in the kitchen, because he felt he comes from royalty, the Gerari family, and royalty doesn't sit in the kitchen. Royalty sits in the dining room on a large table, with the windows, and it's royal. My wife told me too that, she observed or heard about certain people who looked at themselves or actually came from aristocracy and wealth and all that they conduct themselves in a different way. Many times, unfortunately, it comes along with a gaiva, with an ego, haughtiness. But the attitude is, I'm not here to solve a problem. I'm not someone that you have to help. This is the way it is. So the Rebbe says, this attitude should be the one that we take to getting rid of the problem of the chametz. We have to burn it completely. Not we have to burn it because it plagues us. The character deficiency that we are looking to liberate ourselves from, so that we are able at night to go out of Mitzrayim, should be with the attitude, this doesn't belong in my experience. It's just not the Jewish experience. It's not my experience. I'm better than that. Like Rabbi Avram Twersky Shalom writes so beautifully in his Sfarim. He writes that he was raised by his father when he was a young teenager and wanted to do some mischievous things. His father would say in Yiddish, "Es passt nit." Es passt nit. It's not, in English it means it is not befitting. Why not? You know, the family you come from. You come from a Rebbeische family. You know, the Hornesteipler Hasidim, the Hornesteipler Rebbes, on and on and on. And he says that, you know, that was something that he heard, and he shares that in his books to say that we as Yidden have a responsibility to something greater. So it's not about, you know, oh, this deficiency is only my problem. If it's your problem, if it's our problem, it's because it's a problem for the Jewish people and therefore should not be done. So it's much greater. In other words, when we act inappropriately, when we act not nice, when we act out of control, it's not just our issue. We are representative of the Jewish people. We are representative of, you know, Orthodox people, of Frum people, of Haredim, whatever the case. And you'll be judged. People will judge you, whether you like it or not. So this is the attitude of the usher. So let's continue. Then the Rebbe said, this is the morning. And then comes the night. And at the night, we start dealing with the Exodus, the liberation, which we didn't really get to yet. Let's go back and find the page over here. We are on page 163. 163. No. Yeah, what I did want to say is that Moshe brought it to my attention, and I thank him for it. We quoted the verse, Ulugdulosai ein cheker, right? The Maimer, chapter 4, on 162, begins with the verse, God Lashem u'muhulamiyot, right? God is great. U'muhulamiyot is very praiseworthy. It's a pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 145, verse 3. U'lukdulasai, and to his greatness, a cheker. So I translated yesterday, cheker means there is no end. I translated that way because it was a paraphrase of the real translation. The real translation comes from the word chakira, searching, but it doesn't run. And to his greatness, there is no searching. It doesn't, it doesn't sound good. So what does it mean? There's no searching. It means that you can't find him. God is so awesome and so great that even if you search and search, you will never find God. I know God. You know aspects of God. So that's why I just
say in Mashal.
Right. But the wording is ulugdulosai ein cheker. It doesn't say. So you have to. So I translate ein cheker. There is no end, meaning he's basically machshava less ein trisabay. That's what I'm saying. I'm using a word in English that I thought summarizes what the pasuk literally means with the word cheker. So it was good that you pointed that out, Moshe. That's not the actual translation, literal, but it's the paraphrasing the concept that the pasuk means to communicate. And now we are at the second. The Rebbe said there's two ways of explaining it. Are we on 164 already? Where's the second way?
Oh, no, it's 4 lines from the bottom.
Right.
163.
Thank you. So let's go to the second way. The second way of understanding this verse, the Amos Gadol. Well, this is not a verse. This is the Gemara. The Gemara's interpretation on the verse When is Hashem great? Kishahu be'ir alikenu, when he finds himself in the city of God. V'hainu de'em asai shayach likroisei godol. When is it possible to call Hashem great? Rak kishahu be'ir alokenu. It's only when he is in the city of God. Avo ligdulosei encheker. But his true greatness, there is no ability to search and find. Because if you're looking for the essential greatness of Avram, God's real awesomeness, no one can truly find it. And now he brings another verse to support that. It says, Hacheker Elokah Timtza. That's the way you're supposed to read the pasuk, with a question. If you will search, hear it me. If you will search Elokah, God, Timtza, will you find him? You really think you'll find God if you search for him? The essence of God. Uksiv, there's another pasuk that says, L'cho Hashem Agdula. To you Hashem is greatness. The midas Agdula tfeilo b'teilo l'cho. What does it mean, L'cho Hashem? So Chassidus has this interpretation, that the attribute of Gedula, of greatness, is ancillaries, tafel, ubatel, and subservient to L'cho. Moshe, you hear this interpretation? L'cho Hashem ha-Gedula. So literally it means to you Hashem is greatness. Chassidus says, much deeper, that the concept, the definition of God being great is ancillary to the true God. Because God transcends greatness. God is not limited to greatness. If someone's going to say to you, Moshe, is God great? It depends. But the answer is depends. If you want to box God into greatness, he's not great. If you want to say God is also great, he's also great. Avram, you understand? So, L'cho Hashem Hagdula, the Rebbe interprets it, the interpretation brought the Chassidus, that Gedula, as a definition, as a box, is tafel, is ancillary, and ubetela, and subservient to L'cho, you, meaning the essence of God. You cannot say God's essence is great. God's essence includes greatness. Guess what? For that matter, God's greatness includes humility, katan, and many other character traits that Chazal use. Someone will say, well, God is only great. You can't tell me God is not great. Oh, really? What kind of God are you talking about? You're talking about a God that's already associated himself with a definition called great. And who made that definition? God himself. So God is greater than the definition. He created the definition great. So if he created the definition of great, he himself transcends that definition, i.e., he's beyond greatness. So that's why we say, L'cho Hashem ha-Gedula. Gedula is ancillary and subservient to greatness, to God, to L'cho. Let's continue. And now he brings a very famous Gemara. We turn the page to 164. In the very same place where God is Gedula, God is great, Shama temoitza anusanusai. There and then, in that very same location, in that very same experience, you will find his humility. Not elsewhere, Moshe. You could say, God creating the world, or making the splitting the Red Sea, or taking the Jews out of Egypt, or defeating Amalek, that's greatness. But walking on the street every day, the sun coming out, that's small change. What do Chazal say? No. Wherever you identify God as great, Sham, in that very place, in that very experience, you see his humility. What's the humility? What's the humility, Avram? That God condensed himself to a definition called great. Because the definition of great is also a box and a definition. And God's way beyond that. God transcends that. So in other words, God is transcendental. Or in the language of Chabad Hasidus, God is atzmus. Atzm, right? We discussed this essence. So that's why if you consider God great being a definition, then in that very same point, the same place, you can consider God being humble and small. It's no difference. It's another definition of God. And he chooses to be that way whenever he wants. Let's see what he says. Gedula itself, greatness itself, is humility and modesty in comparison legabav yisbarach to God in his transcendental state. And as the rabbis say, Moshel, they give a Moshel, Mishi Yeshle Alfi Alofim Dinizov, someone who has tens of thousands of gold coins. And yet you praise the same person for his silver coins. This is an embarrassment, right, Moshe? If you have gold coins, praising it with silver coins is an embarrassment. Another example, a wise man, who's very wise in all fields of wisdom, in science, in Torah, in art, in all kinds of areas the person is gifted. In medicine, Torah, in Torah, in godly knowledge. The man not only knows a blot Gemara, page Gemara, the Gemara understands Chassidus. Chochmas elikus is Chassidus. Divinity, the study of divinity. So he knows Gemara, he knows Chassidus, and he knows medicine. Right? Maybe our Velvel is one of those people. V'im zeh hu min yad, and simultaneously he's like Moshe. He's a craftsman with his hand, v'chacham b'chochmas ha'maaseh, and he can use his hand for all kinds of tremendous chachma, be it art, be it carpentry. He's gifted with his hand. Harei kisheyishabchu oiseh b'chochmas ha'maaseh. Someone will come along and said, you know that this fellow, his greatness is, wow, what a craftsman. This is an embarrassment to him. Here is a person who excels in godly wisdom and Torah wisdom and in medicine. And what are you laud about him? That he can make a nice round table or a square table with good legs and etc. Come on. This is a muscle. Yes, Moshe.
It's just interesting. So we're talking about this, that the Frierdiker Rebbe is bringing this muscle because his grandfather, the Rebbe Maharash, right, was also knew how to work with his hands.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Isn't in the library it's upstairs in 770? There's some things of his, right?
Not in the library, in the Rebbe's room. In the Rebbe's room, there's a round table, a little round table next to his desk. That table was built by the Rebbe Maharash. And it was sent here by a relative to the Rebbe's library, to the Rebbe, in parts. It's made out of pieces. So it was, you were able to send it on a boat. And that's how it ended up here. And that's the table that they say that Rebbe Maharash built with his own hands.
It's also interesting because the Rebbe Maharash also wrote 2 or 3 Megillas.
Yeah.
And when I was writing, anyway, it's very interesting because he was a sofer also.
Yes, and that's how there's the Hayom Yom, right? That we don't, the Megillah doesn't have, our Megillahs don't have Hamelech beginning each column because the Maharash didn't write it that way. Right. Yes. Let's go back. Thank you. So too, the concept of greatness is comparable to calling a gifted, godly man and scholar and doctor that it's nothing. It's another shiftless. Making a big deal about God's greatness. You're missing the point. You're missing the boat. God's way beyond greatness. If he also has greatness, but don't limit him to greatness. Look at the words. His essential greatness ain't cheker. You cannot find. God's greatness transcends in the intellectual realm at all completely. Okay, we're going to stop here. Moshe, make a note where we're up to. We'll stop over here because it starts another. He explains a little more, and I don't want to rush it. But this idea is very important. And I just for a second, people are enamored. I'll tell you, Reb Moshe Feinstein. Reb Moshe. Does anyone have a bad word to say about Reb Moshe? No. Even those that were upset with some of his rulings 50, 60 years ago were scared of him. The Satmar Rav, who was very upset with his ruling on in vitro fertilization back in the 60s, literally very, and he came out completely against him. Reb Moshe was, matir permitted it in a certain way, but nevertheless, and the Satmar Rav, who was a great Talmud Chacham, felt it was a wrong psak, or it shouldn't be ruled that way. So they said to him, so should we go and meet with him? He said, don't go meet with him because he'll make mincemeat out of you, because he can learn much better than you. The Satmar Rav's objection was that this will lead to a callousness in the overall issue. You understand? And I in my book on Satmar, I identified that I think a lot of his rhetoric, it was rhetoric. Why? His rhetoric was, if he doesn't make it into a big deal, you're going to go further. It's a gedder. It's what Chazal could call a gedder, the Gemara in Shabbos. Almost half of Hilchah Shabbos is all about Gedorim, or maybe, technically you're allowed to do it, but we don't want you maybe to do this. You don't want to swim, so don't do this. You know what I'm saying? So the Satmar Rav felt that a ruling like that will lead to isurim, to actual, wasting of semen. Okay? In this case, you're allowed to spill the semen. Why? For the purpose of analyzing it and then inserting it and having a child, right? But it lead to a hefkedus, to a situation where you'll do whatever you want. So then, when his people said, "Let's go and confront him," not just sit in the back and send out letters and publish articles and and talk not nicely. Satmar Rav said, "Stay away from him because he's gonna show you you're totally wrong." Now, so the Reb Moshe was the leading posek of the generation, the past generation. Was that Reb Moshe? I think anyone who knew him would say that wasn't Reb Moshe. Reb Moshe was his humility, that he could sit at the same table with a little boy or a girl and talk to them and feel good. And the same with Reb Chaim Kanievsky. If you heard what I said, from what I gathered from the people I spoke to was, yes, he learned day and night, and yes, he knew all of Torah, whatever that means. But that to me, that's not his greatness. His greatness is his accessibility and willingness to help every Jew that came in to ask him something. Come in. You don't need an appointment, and you don't need guards, and you don't need showtime. You know what I'm saying? Now, of course, a little seder you need, but the attitude, the accessibility, the being, homely, fatherly, that attitude, that's special. Rav Moshe was that way too. Rav Moshe was such a sweet person. Sweet person. I think I told you, when I researched the article about him, that I wrote the book about him actually, so I came across a certain rabbi who lived in the Queens area, who came out with a book against Rav Moshe's tshuvas. I mean, this is like, and like you would think that they would stone him. He went to the printer, the same printer who printed up Moshe's Sforim, and he asked him, "Would you print my sefer?" So the printer said, I think it was a Chabadnik, I think. I told you this just to repeat it quickly. Isser didn't hear it. I don't know if Avram heard it. So the printer said, I have to ask Rav Moshe. First of all, I've been printing his Sforim for many years. So he has preference, and you're writing a book against his book. He asked Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe said, sure you should print it. Sure you should print it. And mind you, he wrote not with the greatest derech eretz. That's humility. The person who's opposing what you wrote, you tell the printer, you could have easily told him, don't print it, it's not appropriate. Especially if he's writing, with chutzpah. He was a great scholar. He was a great Talmud Chacham, but nevertheless, that's Rav Moshe. That humility. So when we're learning here about L'cho Hashem Agdula. If Gedula becomes a definition, a box, a thing, stay far away from it. Stay far away from it. If Gedula is part of a humble experience, entertain it. I also told you in the past, years ago, my experience with a Kabbalist. I was learning certain teachings of the Arizal, about reincarnation. I really took time to learn it, and I had questions because questions from the text, and so I was told there's someone here in Brooklyn that knows it well, and I called him, and he spoke down at me, very, very arrogant. I should have hung up the phone, but I had derech eretz. So I said, thank you and goodbye, and I never called him again. Then I went to someone else here who was much more humble. So, the definition, the Alter Rebbe says it already in chapter 6. If you understand chapter 6 in Tanya, it's clear. The Alter Rebbe says, what is the definition of holiness, Kadosh, Kedusha? It's bittul. And that's it. If we want to know, is this person holy? Should I follow this rabbi? Should I follow this rebbe? Should I follow? The answer is, do they have bittul? If they have bittul, entertain it. If they don't have bittul, stay far away. No, they still can answer your halachic questions, and they can teach you a shir, but they're not your teacher. They're not your mentor. They're not your guide. You need bittul. You need bittul. That's what we learned in Chabad. Bittul is the kernel of truth. And Rav Moshe had bittul. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, it seems, that had that bittul, not that I'm better. The fact that he's a person that knows all of the Torah and learns all of the Torah, what are people bothering him? Or say my father, when he was 1950, 12 and a half, he wasn't even bar mitzvah. He comes from the Maborot in near Haifa, where they Atlit, where they took in the refugees that came from Romania, and he helps the manager, the organizer there of the camp, by making an announcement in Romanian so that the people can understand to come 2:00 to a meeting in the main hall. And then my father says, could you help me with something? He says, sure, I would like to meet a Navi. He says, you want to meet a Navi? Go to Bnei Brak, you'll find a Navi. My father says, I don't know what Bnei Brak is. I just know what my Rebbe, my tutor taught me after I went to public school during the day. And at night, my grandmother hired a teacher for me several times a week. He told me there's such a thing. The Torah talks about a Navi. You want a Navi? There's a Jew, they call him the Chazoin Ish. He lives in Bnei Brak. Go there. My father comes to my grandfather. He says, I'd like to go see the Navi in Bnei Brak. My grandfather probably thought he was out of his mind, but he didn't say anything. And he gave him a few coins, a few lirot. And the first time that my father went on a bus, I think the same number 54 that goes into Jabotinsky in Bnei Brak, from Netanya. He went from Atlit to Netanya, and Netanya transferred for another bus, and then up a third bus, and he got to the house of, they told him, the house of the Chazoin Ish of the Navi. He knocks on the door, and the aide for the Chazoin Ish comes to the door, the Gabbai, and he says, what do you want, little boy? He says, I want to see the Navi. He says, get out of here, and don't come back, or you'll be in trouble. My father takes his fists and bangs on the door, and he keeps on banging, and the Gabbai comes back to the door, and he says, I warned you, I'm going to hit you. You are bothering us. There's no time for jokes. My father says, I'm not bothering you. I know there's a Navi here. And I was taught by my Melamed in Romania that the Torah talks about a Navi. I want to see a Navi. And the guy slams the door at him. My father, the third time, bangs on the door. The guy says, I'm going to hit you. He doesn't care. And he comes back and he says, I went to the Chazoin Ish and I asked him, I told him there's this boy bothering. He says, let him in. He opened the door. His whole attitude changed to my father. He wasn't angry at him all of a sudden. And there was a table with soda and cookies. And the Chazoin Ish came out. And he told the Chazoin Ish that his Melamed, he didn't tell him, are you the Navi? You know, he had enough brains. He saw the Navi. And he said, Chazoin Ish says, what can I help you with, boy? He says, my Melamed told me when I get there to Yisrael, I should go to a yeshiva. He says, you want to go to yeshiva? I have a yeshiva Tiferes Zion here in Bnei Brak. He calls his assistant, the principal, and he came and he took my father from the Chazoin Ish's yeshiva from his house to the yeshiva. Why am I telling the story? The Yemit Chazoin Ish was a very holy person and everything else. And, you know, the humility, a little boy comes to you, seems to be, has nothing better what to do, you know, running around and nudging, and he doesn't say that. Come in, talks to you for a few minutes, tries to help you. So the L'cha Hashem Hagdula has to be put into perspective. And that's why in Chabad we're not fathomed by greatness. Greatness doesn't talk to us. It's a nice, you know, what's it called? Candy. You know what I mean? Okay. The whole concept of Gedolim, I don't want to go into it now because it's late, but, you know, that's not our language. You know, it's Hasidim Bechlal, but Chabad in particular, this whole concept, the Gedolim, you know, he's a Godel, she's a Godel, he's not a Godel. It's not part of our jargon, our dictionary. You know, you could be a simple person and you're really the greatest of the great. Shlomo Karlbach, Shlomo would always tell over stories of the miser and the pauper and the beggar, and they were the greatest of the great, right? Who is to say? Because again, philosophically, that's what we learned in today's shir. Philosophically, if you box God into greatness, He's not great and you're not great, and it's ridiculous. If you understand that God transcends greatness, and one feature of the puzzle is greatness, then it means something. I think everyone understands, yeah? So, Sei gesund to everyone, and have a safe trip, Isser. This is a first for us, for me at least. So you got to teach me when you get back the secret, and we'll be able to do this. Because years ago, when the Rebbe would fabring, and you were flying from LA to New York, and fabringen, you couldn't connect, and if you connected, it costed so much money. I remember, so now look, you can fly in a plane, and you can not only hear, but you could see. I mean, Mashiach. Issa, you've brought Mashiach to the Shir. Sei gesund, everyone. Shalom.